Good morning and afternoon to all of our viewers. Thank you for joining us today for the 8th episode of the weekly wrap by Tech for Fin, where we discuss some of the hottest fintech topics in the news from the past week, along with a new guest joining me every week. And we'll aim to do it in just 15 minutes or less. I hope you got your coffee ready. I certainly do. Now, let's not waste any more time and get this show going. My name is Jeffrey Tower, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Business Development for ChargeAfter. Today's guest comes to us all the way from Dubai in way of Zurich. Both cities are called home to her. Today's guest is Irina Heaver, Director of Legal and Strategy at Genero Capital. Irina, welcome to the Weekly Wrap, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, wonderful people. Irina Heaver here from snowy Switzerland. Usually I introduce myself, Irina Heaver from sunny Dubai, but this month I'm skiing in Switzerland. So
there you go. We can also ski on the sand in Dubai, apparently, or in the mall.
You can ski in the Mall of Emirates for sure, and this is where I learned to ski actually 12 years ago. Being Australian, you don't really have that many opportunities to learn to ski in Australia, so I learned to ski in Dubai, which is, here's a piece of information you never asked for, but you got it anyway. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me to be on your weekly wrap. And as I mentioned, I'm based between Dubai and Switzerland. I'm an attorney that turned fintech entrepreneur. And one of the things that I've recently done, I've launched, co-founded and launched one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges in the Middle East.
Wow.
And now I'm working with Nasdaq Dubai and Dubai-based investment bank called Genero Capital, and we are building emerging markets marketplace for Nasdaq Dubai for emerging companies. So it will be something similar to AIM in London. You might know about the emerging market AIM in London.
Sure.
20 years ago when they launched, they had something, less than a handful of companies. And 20 years later, they raised over something like 3 billion pounds for over 3,000 companies. So it's a very, very successful marketplace, very successful market for emerging companies. And Nasdaq Dubai, you know how Dubai is. We like to have everything bigger and better and grandiosier than anybody else. So
I guess Dubai is a Texas of the Middle East, because Texas, everything is bigger in Texas.
Absolutely. We like to be everything of the Middle East. We have the fintech hub of the Middle East. We have the Texas of the Middle East. You name it, we will claim it because we can. So this is what I'm working on with Nasdaq Dubai at the moment. And Crown Prince of Dubai has announced it literally a few weeks ago. And next year we'll be launching with a few companies. Interestingly enough, we're working with a couple of fintech companies, a couple of blockchain companies, getting them ready to get listed on Nasdaq Dubai on public market, which is very exciting. Because if you're a growing technology company, your initial investors, your initial shareholders need an exit opportunity, and being a publicly listed company, that's an amazing exit opportunity for early investors and also the founders.
Absolutely fantastic. That's very interesting. Great work over there. So let's go ahead and get started. And we'll get started with Stripe. So, of course, during the weekly ramps, we talk about the companies that were in the news. And Stripe has been in the news a lot this past week. So Stripe is entering the world of banking, or banking as a service, and will offer services in a deal with Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, with their new product called Treasury. Stripe is going to offer checking accounts and other business banking services as the payments behemoth's latest attempt to become the internet economy's financial supermarket. Stripe, which processes millions or payments for millions of online businesses and e-commerce platforms, will soon give its customers the option of offering insured, interest-bearing bank accounts, debit cards, and other cash management services. These products aren't meant for consumers. Rather, they're designed for the merchants and vendors that do business with the Stripe's customers. Among the early adopters of Stripe's new banking services is Shopify, which starting early next year will actually offer Shopify balance accounts to many of the hundreds of thousands of merchants that use its software already. Now, Shopify balance accounts will be held at the Afal Bancor, but Stripe is also partnering, as I mentioned, with Goldman in the US and with Citigroup and Barclays PLC to internationally store and move the customer funds. Now, Irina, we've been seeing a huge increase in challenger or neobanks over the past year. Mostly all the services are aimed at the consumer. But here, Stripe is not opening their own challenger bank, but rather providing banking services, an API, to other non-banks in order to allow them to offer their merchants banking services. What are your thoughts on this particular move by Stripe?
Well, I'm not a fan of Stripe, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
In 2019, they raised an additional round, and they got everyone in the Middle East super excited because they told that this additional raise will be used to expand into the Middle East.
Sure.
So it's been 2 years and we're still waiting. They still have not arrived. I know a lot of businesses that are using Stripe. They're super complimentary. They're saying this is the most convenient way to do business, which is great for them. But we're here in the Middle East, and we're still waiting for them to arrive. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, they're not in Israel either, right?
They're not, but they were here about a year and a half ago or so, and they had a meeting with me to understand the market in Israel. And they said they were entering, but that was a year and a half ago.
Exactly. So 2 years ago, they got all of us excited, and we're still sitting here and waiting for them. So Stripe, if you're listening, please hurry up, because Middle East, we are 570 million people, and less than 14% of Middle Eastern residents have bank accounts. Did you know that?
I had no clue.
Only 14% of residents of people in the Middle East are banked. Imagine the opportunity for the fintechs. Imagine for the opportunity for Stripe here. Come on, hurry up. So when it comes to their move going into B2B and B2B, which is a very logical move, right? You go where the customers are, you go where the users are, and the user acquisition is very expensive. You run a fintech company, I set up a fintech company, you know how it is. User acquisition is incredibly difficult. Not only acquisition, but also retention. It's incredibly difficult. So what you do, you go to where users hang out, which is in this case Shopify. There's a lot of businesses, a lot of merchants there, and you provide, and you enter into some sort of partnership, and you provide them that banking service, which is this is how you scale. This is how you scale a business. I think the days when you onboard users one by one are gone. The costs are absolutely ridiculous. The days when you can use Facebook ads to target your audience are gone, because it's just the cost is super expensive.
So right now it's all about strategy, business development, channel.
Absolutely.
Got it.
And Stripe is it's a very smart move, and just hurry up, come to the Middle East.
I quite agree with what you just said over there. So let me ask you something else. There's been a lot of focus on consumer payments and buy now, pay later. I actually come from that industry myself, and touchless payments, etc. Back in 2020, and of course going into 2021. Now, but going into to 2021, is 2021 going to be the year B2B Fintech, or officially known as Fintech 3.0? Because I personally have been seeing a lot of movement all about B2B Fintech, and people are now calling it Fintech 3.0.
Yes, I like how people come up in our industry. I like how people come up with new terms. I personally, myself, nowadays spend a lot of time in Web 3.0. So that's all your decentralized organizations, your autonomous organizations that exist somewhere in the ether, etc., etc. Yes, I like these new terms. I mean, that makes perfect sense, right? And if you're in this industry, if you're in the sales and the business development and the strategy side of the business, you see this train coming. Like there's no other way about it. It's incredibly difficult to run a business. It's incredibly difficult to scale fintech, again, because of the user acquisition and the user retention costs. And going after businesses that require your infrastructure, or they can leverage your infrastructure for additional revenue, but also allowing you to scale, that's the only way forward. And not only in fintech, I see that in other industries, crypto, blockchain, gaming, VR. VR is now going after automobile industry. Why? Because that's what the users are. So you see that trend across the technology, not just fintech.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and skip over really quick and talk a little about what's going on in the UAE, and especially the Abraham Accords and the peace agreement, and everybody's interested in that. So first of all, again, happy to have you here. I think you'll be able to give a great amount of insight. I personally believe that there's so many people that are interested, here in Israel and of course in the UAE, to start to do business with the UAE. But whenever you start to do business with a foreign country, there's a lot of stuff you have to know. It's not just about shaking a hand and signing a dotted line. It's getting to know the culture, getting to know who the people are. In some cultures, you might have a great deal, but if they want to get to know you personally first as well. So you live in Dubai, right? And many of my friends have been in Dubai over the past week and over the past weeks. And, in this past week, it looked like there was this huge homecoming celebration by the best friends, if you've seen any of the pictures. And I can tell you firsthand that people here in Israel are very excited for all the opportunities that have actually opened up and that are opening up with the Abraham Accords. So what can you tell me about doing business in the UAE? What's important for the entrepreneur, for the business development professional to know, if it's from Israel coming into the UAE or really anybody else coming into UAE? What can you tell them about doing business in the UAE? What's important?
So I arrived to Dubai 12 years ago, and as you can imagine, a few things have changed over the last 12 years, but a few things remain very, very consistent. It's the way how friendly Emiratis are, how welcoming they are. In the 12 years, I never felt unwelcomed, or I never felt, what are you doing here? Go back to your own country. And never. Men, women, elder generation, younger generation, everybody is super welcoming, everybody's super friendly. You come to their house. I mean, it takes a while to get into that community, to get invited to their houses, to get invited to their weddings, to get invited to their farms, because it's quite a thing to have a farm in the desert. But once you get into that, you sort of see how family oriented they are, how friendly, welcoming, food everywhere, just the amount of feeding you will experience when you come to the Middle East is just ridiculous. But then it's not dissimilar to Israel. You experience the same thing when you come to Israel. People are welcoming and friendly, curious. Oh, wow, you came from Dubai. How did you get in? Oh, tell me more. Oh, you're from Australia. That's amazing. I have a cousin in Melbourne. Do you know him? Yes, of course I know him. We're only 25 million people in Australia. So I find the culture is quite similar and very, very business merchant oriented, because this is the history of the UAE, right? They're merchants. They like to do business. They like to see business opportunities, and they like to leverage those business opportunities. What you find in Middle East different from Western countries, and that's where Westerners get a lot of things wrong, is the relationship building. So I come from before fintech, I come from the oil and gas industry, and I spent a lot of time in Texas. You go in Texas, you shake hands, you sign a paper, finish. You can be done in 2-3 meetings. It will never happen in the Middle East. You need to establish that relationship. You need to show that you are here for the long term. You're not coming, take advantage, and leaving. You're here for the long term. I'm here to set up the shop. I'm here to employ people. I'm here to share my knowledge. I'm here to, depending also on the size of your business, it might be a regulatory requirement for you to have a presence and to have that knowledge transfer situation going.
So, so what is expected of a foreigner? Let's just say an Israeli wants to go to the UAE. So what's expected of the foreigner coming into the UAE and setting up a business? Is there anything in particular that a foreigner should know?
It's very easy. It's very easy to set up business, set up a company in the UAE, depending on what sort of industry you are. But let's say you are in the fintech industry, in our industry, there are something like 50 free zones, free of tax. So there is no taxes, there's no import and export taxes. So, and also there is a way to set up a business onshore. It might sound a little bit difficult. Oh, wow, you have 50 free zones. Where do I set up? But once you sort of wrap your head around it, there are financial hubs like Dubai International Financial Center, and there's a similar one in Abu Dhabi called ADGM. Also, there are technology hubs, there are media cities, there are internet cities. So you're sort of depending on, you get a good lawyer, somebody who's reasonable, and they will navigate you through that. It's very easy to set up. What has happened over the last couple of days that I know personally, over 150 people got stuck on the border with Dubai because a passport was not being recognized in the system, because there has never been a travel situation before. So when you're trying to come in, the immigration officer literally could not find Israel as a country on the system. So these sort of little glitches will continue happening.
Of course.
So in terms of setting up a company, there's absolutely no restrictions on the nationality to set up a company, except if you're coming from a restricted country. There are some countries that US has restrictions against, so UAE are following that. But Israel might not be a country where you could physically set up a company in yet, but I'm sure that will get changed in the next couple of weeks. Things are moving on. So setting up a company is very easy. Renting an office, very easy. There's lots of business hubs, shared offices. You receive a residency visa, and here you go. You get a tax-free status in the UAE.
And can all that be done prior? Can all that be done prior to actually going to the UAE, or do you need to go there first and then set everything up? Or is it worthwhile doing all that before you actually arrive in Dubai or Abu Dhabi?
Yes, it's worthwhile doing homework prior to your arrival.
Sure.
For example, if you want to have a residency visa, you need attested educational certificates. So there's some little hook. So inquire as to the requirements, as to the legal requirements, collect all the paperwork. It's very easy, and your attorney in Dubai can assist you. It's the interesting thing that we've had such an inflow from Israeli companies of requests wanting to expand into the Middle East, wanting to set up in the Middle East, which makes perfect sense, because before Israel is actually considered to be Europe in the Middle East for whatever reason. Israel has always been considered Europe, not part of the Middle East. But before,
and Israel does play in the Euro League as well, and they're in the Eurovision. So yes,
well, Australia is in the Eurovision. So
I know, right? How does that make sense?
I don't know. Nothing makes sense after 2020, that's for sure. You just go with it.
That is true,
yes. So Dubai is the capital of fintech in the Middle East. That's how we like to call ourselves. That's how we like to promote ourselves.
Did you hear that, Tel Aviv? Dubai is now calling themselves the capital of fintech.
We have been calling themselves that for years now. So now that Tel Aviv is part of the Middle East and there's open travel arrangements.
We can have a king and a queen.
We are the sheikhs, you can be the kings, fine. So over 50% of fintechs set up in the Middle East are set up in Dubai. Over something like 70% of funding received by fintechs is received out of UAE. So for Israeli fintech companies, for Israeli tech companies being established in Dubai, it's a great springboard into MENA region. So we have Egypt, 100 million people there. We have, Saudi, with around 25, 30 million population. So you have that amazing sort of penetration, and Dubai is your point. You set up in Dubai and then you penetrate the Africa and the North Africa
Right.
and other Middle Eastern countries. So that's why I think it's an exciting opportunity for Israeli fintechs.
If you can give out 3 important rules or a piece of advice about doing business with the UAE or with people in the UAE, what would they be?
Do not shake women's hands. Do not offer it first. Do not be very, very mindful of the respect that women have in the Middle East, and women the position that women have in the culture, in the Middle Eastern culture. People always ask me, "Wow, you're an Australian blonde woman living in the Middle East. Poor you! Oh my God, that must be horrible." I was like, "Really horrible? I'm having the best time ever. I have never been disrespected. I have never been whistled at or any of that." So be mindful of that. Not that I expect any of reasonable people to act inappropriately, but also be mindful how your actions can be construed. You might have the best intentions ever, asking of a phone number of this really beautiful Arab girl, but probably not in the first meeting. Have decent, honest, straightforward intentions. If it is your intention to establish yourself in the Middle East and establish presence in the Middle East, also think about the long term. You are here for the long term. This is a long-term play. This is not let's come in, grab whatever we can and leave. Because in the Middle East, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of that, especially let's say in the oil and gas sector. There are some oil and gas companies that came in, grabbed whatever they could and left. No. Lots of companies, lots of governments in the Middle East have experienced that opportunistic behavior, and now people are worried of that. So have a long-term vision and patience. And the last point is, if your meeting is at 9 o'clock, be there at 9 o'clock, but don't expect anybody else to be there at 9 o'clock, and just be patient. Have your laptop with you, do your work, have your coffee, be prepared. But that's also not that dissimilar from the culture in Israel. Be patient, be friendly, be open, and have that serious mindset to service the community in the long term.
Real quick, are the people in the UAE as excited about doing business with Israel and Israelis as the Israelis are ecstatic about the UAE now?
Absolutely, absolutely. The residents, the nationals, the government officials, absolutely ecstatic. Absolutely, because let's not beat around the bush. A lot of Emiratis visited Israel before. A lot of Israelis come to the UAE, and there's been always some sort of a trade and some sort of a relationship. So
we call it a wink, wink, nod, nod.
Exactly. So there was a lot of that going on, especially in the oil and gas space, in the cybersecurity space, in the military space. So let's not pretend that, oh my God, this is the first time ever we see an Israeli person in Dubai. But that's the first time ever when you can sit in a coffee shop and hear Israelis sitting at the table next to you speaking not English. So that's the first time ever, and which is quite amazing. So yes, the nationals, the residents, the government officials are very excited. And look at UAE. The land prices are cheaper than in Israel, and their property prices are cheaper. We've got amazing weather all year round. Some months it's hotter than others, but it is not very dissimilar from Tel Aviv. So the opportunities for holidays, for business is just ridiculous, both ways. And yes, we are very excited. And now, and there's quite a big Jewish community in the UAE.
I've seen, yeah.
There's quite a big Jewish community in the UAE, and now people can openly admit to their faith, which is great.
Right.
Which is
and I've seen kosher restaurants as well.
Yes, and there's kosher meals being served on Emirates Airlines, but halal and kosher are not that dissimilar either. So the cultures are actually quite similar. The food is quite similar. But the great thing is that you can openly
you can be yourself. You can be yourself.
You can openly acknowledge your heritage, even though you might not have the religious intentions, but you can openly acknowledge your heritage, and those who want to practice their religion can now do that openly, which is great. I mean, peace, either way you put it, peace is great for everyone.
That is true. Well, that is time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for episode 8 of the Weekly Wrap. That was actually 9, 8 of the Weekly Wrap for Tech for Fin. Irina, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your input on the hottest topics in fintech news. And thank you so much for talking to us about everything that's going on in Dubai and the UAE. If anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn is the best way. Send me a message, connect with me, ask me whatever question you have. A few years ago, when I was a partner in a law firm, I wrote a guide to doing business in the UAE, so I might share that as well if people are interested. Might be slightly outdated, but the principles are the same. LinkedIn is the best way to find me. Irina.
Absolutely.
Heaver.
Wonderful. Please make sure to join us next week for episode 9. Same time, same place, same host, and a new guest. I've been Jeffrey Tower. Tonight is the first night of Hanukkah, so happy Hanukkah, everybody. Stay safe and be well.
Happy Hanukkah.